part C, you need to discuss the factors that will influence whether Excel settles the purchase consideration in cash or through a share exchange. And then there's 1 mark available for communication skills, and that is awarded for logical argument. All right, guys, so please just be careful. This discussion comes directly from your lecture notes. If you go back to the lecture on mergers and acquisitions, this is on page 6 of your lecture notes for mergers and acquisitions. Please just make sure when you approach this discussion, you are looking at this from the correct company's perspective. There's 2 different ways that this can be asked. Either this can be asked from the perspective of the acquiring company or from the perspective of the target company. Now, if you read this here, you need to discuss the factors that will influence whether Excel settles the purchase consideration in cash or through a share exchange. So it's very important that you are looking at this from the perspective of Excel, or in other words, from the perspective of the acquiring company. All right, if you're happy with that, then you'll see I'm going to jump to the suggested solution and go through all of the discussion points, but everything here comes from page 6 of your lecture notes on mergers and acquisitions. Okay, but your discussion must be from the perspective of Excel, from the acquiring company's perspective. Read the required carefully. So, what are some of the things that Excel will need to consider when it comes to settling the purchase consideration? Are they going to give the Prestige shareholders cash for their shares, or are they going to give them shares in Excel? Remember, that's a share exchange if they're given shares in Excel. So firstly, they obviously need to consider the preference of Prestige's shareholders. What do Prestige's shareholders want? Do they want shares in Excel, or do they want cash for their investment? Then, obviously, if they want to go the cash route, they need to consider whether they have sufficient cash available. So do they have enough cash available to actually finance this acquisition? And if they do have enough cash available and they're going to use their cash for this acquisition, they need to consider whether it's going to cause any liquidity problems for the company. However, if they don't have any cash, but they want to go the cash route, then they're obviously going to need to raise cash. So if they do not have sufficient cash available, and they obviously don't want to go the share exchange route, then they will need to raise the cash that they need. And they can either raise the cash by issuing new shares, which is obviously equity finance, or by raising new debt finance. Now, whenever a company raises new finance, we know that they always need to try and move closer towards their target capital structure. So it's very important. If they want to settle this transaction in cash, but they do not have enough cash available, they're going to have to raise cash. When they're raising the new finance, they must try and move closer towards their target capital structure when new funds are raised. So that deals with the cash element. If they go for the share exchange route, meaning that Prestige's shareholders will now be given shares in Excel, the problem with that is it's going to cause a dilution in the shareholding for Excel's existing shareholders, because obviously Excel is now going to issue new shares to the shareholders of Prestige, and the existing shareholders of Excel will then have a dilution in their shareholding. It will cause the market price per share to drop, because the market value in total should remain the same, but the market value per share will drop because there's now more shares in issue. Earnings per share will drop, dividends per share will drop because there's more shares in issue. However, hopefully, one way that the shareholders might actually be happy with this is if you tell them the reason why you're doing this is to buy another company. It's to buy shares in Prestige. So hopefully after the acquisition, the combined company will now have a higher value with higher earnings and higher dividends, which will hopefully offset the fact that they have more shares in issue. All right, and then finally, they also need to consider if they go the share exchange route. So if they give the shareholders in Prestige shares in Excel, they need to consider what those shareholders expect when it comes to dividend payments in the future. So if you now give them shares in Excel, in the future, what are these shareholders going to expect when it comes to dividend payments? Are they used to getting very high dividends on an annual basis from Prestige, or do they not usually get dividends from Prestige? But it's obviously an important thing that Excel will need to consider because it will have an impact on their cash flows in the future. All right, so like I said, guys, you really shouldn't have struggled with that, okay? That comes directly from the lecture. And even when you're studying it also, try not to study these things off by heart. Like, this isn't a list of things you should be studying from in the lecture. If you think about this logically, you can see all of these discussion points here are logical. Obviously, if they use the cash that they have, it could potentially cause liquidity problems. Obviously, if they want to use cash, but if they don't have the cash, they're going to have to raise cash. Obviously, if they issue new shares, it's going to cause a dilution for the existing shareholders. That's all very logical discussion points. So when you're studying, obviously, you need to learn the things, but if you understand what you're studying, it also makes it a lot easier to remember, and you're not just memorizing things like a parrot. All right. Then there's only one more part of the required, and this is also directly from your notes, so no excuses here. You should have easily scored full marks for Part D. You need to list the components. You don't even need to discuss. You just need to list the components that Excel should include in their financial proposal, assuming that new funds need to be raised to finance the acquisition of Prestige. All right. So assuming Excel now needs to raise new finance in order to cover the purchase consideration of Prestige, what are they going to include in their financial proposal? All right. And we covered this in, if you go right to the back of your lecture notes on mergers and acquisitions, you've got notes there on business plans and financial proposals, and I've given you all of the different things that need to be included in a business plan or financial proposal. So you just needed to list those headings there, guys, and that's something that you do just need to study. So if we jump to the suggested solution, you can see very, very simple. That's why I've only included half a mark for each of the points that you've discussed over here. So obviously to score 4 marks over there, you need to come up with at least 8 points. But all of this comes directly from your lecture notes. So in a business plan or in a financial proposal, you always first have an executive summary, which is obviously a high-level summary of the complete document for executives that don't have time to read the whole document. You then have the business description, the ownership and management team of the company, the product or service that they offer, the market that they're working in, as well as an industry analysis and their sales strategy, the facilities and resources that they need, their business model, the capital that they need, as well as the milestones, their financial data and forecasts, stakeholders and sustainability information, risk and risk management information, and then appendices, which is additional information which supports any of the previous sections in your financial proposal or business plan. All right, so once again, that's directly from your lecture notes. All right, guys, that then brings us to the end of this question. If there's still anything that you're struggling with, please let me know. Thank you.